Hello, Ivan. How's it going?
Hi, how's it going? Good, good.
It's a lot of pleasure to have you in this event. And yeah, it's a pleasure for me personally to have a chat with you. So yeah, let's make it a little bit fun for the people. A lot of technical questions
Sure.
that you have to answer as well. Nothing surprising, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's start with a very very common question. Is it what is the time now in Singapore?
It's 9:17 p.m. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's not too bad. I think it's midnight,
Yeah,
but yeah,
not bad. Yeah.
yeah. Most probably next time we can make it a little bit earlier, so be within the working hours as well. So yeah, thank you very
Right.
much for being here. We are going to just ask some light questions in the beginning, and get along with the Vue community. Most probably,
Hmm.
most of these questions you get asked before, and but some of
Sure.
our audience might not know about them and need some further, um, explanation from you.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
let's just start with something, not really very technical as well. Some people are just, curious about your kind of blurry Twitter profile image. What is that from?
I think that picture was taken at Node.js in Paris. Uh, I forgot which year was it, 2018 or 19. Um, so they had professional photographers. So there were a bunch of good photos. Then when I was picking one for the profile picture, I saw the blurry one, and I was like, "This actually looks kind of cool." Uh, like if people who know me can still tell it's actually me, but people who don't know me will just see a blurry one, and they'll be like, it adds a little bit of mysteriousness to the profile picture. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
too deep in it. It's just I found randomly found the picture to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so some people just that it is the internet, it doesn't look well, and just open it and keep waiting for it. But yeah, it's blurry. You choose it blurry in the beginning. So yeah,
Yeah, I think it's also kind of like a interesting trick. When people look at my profile, they'd be like, "I want to see his face," and they click into it, and they're like, "I still can't."
yeah, this brings some traction as well to your profile pic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So yeah, let's jump into the more technical stuff. Let's start
Mhm.
with this live. So what are the best extensions that you're using with Vue 3 and TypeScript in these code? Or yeah, mostly,
Mhm.
what are your extensions?
Well, the only Vue specific extension I'm using is Valar. So that is our new recommended extension for Vue in general. Not only with TypeScript, but in general, if you're working with single file components, you should be using Volar. I know some users. So previously, we had our official extension was Viter, and a lot of people are still using it. But Johnson, who is the author of Volar, has been working full time on improving Volar for the past 5 months, and he's been doing a lot of great work, improving the performance, documenting the internal code, like making it more maintainable. Also, we actually just recently are working on something so that Viter actually now publishes a package that exposes its features through an API. So Volar can actually, in a future version of Volar, will actually use Viter under the hood to basically replicate some of the features that do not overlap between the two extensions.
Mhm.
So some features that Viter users are kind of used to but are missing in Volar will actually be essentially ported over. So you have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So people can just install it today, and it has everything in Vue.
Yep.
Yeah,
Pretty much. Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah, you said that it's using Vue under the hood, so most probably it is extending Vue instead of replacing it, right?
Yep.
Okay,
But
great.
obviously, Volar is still shipping its own TypeScript inference and all that stuff. So to give you better performance. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, performance is always a problem with Vue, so happy to hear that. So next question is, in addition to Vue, you brought Vite to the front-end
Mhm.
development community. Do you have any other projects in the world you would like to share?
For now, these two projects are kind of enough for for me to work on. It's already quite difficult trying to split time between the two. In fact, I've been leaving a lot of the work in Vue to the Vue team. Matthias Patek, you probably know him by his GitHub Twitter handle. He's actually been doing most of the planning and coordination for V3. So the majority of the V3 work is actually pioneered by the team. So I am for the past few months, I've been serving more from a sort of advisory and sort of more like a higher level decision making role. So we discuss with the team on the issues that's really important, significant decisions that needs to be made. So, but a lot of the actual work of triaging issues and figuring out what the actual PRs, merging them, a lot of them has been done by the team. So I'm super happy that we are able to build a strong team behind Vue to make it a community-driven project, so that I can kind of pull my focus back on the Vue side, because when I was working on V2, I really had to invest a lot of time and energy into it. So I kind of have to, it's really difficult to do two things in equal capacity at the same time. So I kind of have to always context switch. Yeah. So I don't think I can add another one into the list, at least for now.
It means that you're spending more time now with Vue or with the project?
More with Vue at this moment. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's clear. Yeah. Thank you. So next up is a question that comes up, several times. With Pinia being the recommended state management library, is there an end of life set for Vuex, or will contribute to be maintained?
So the interesting about Vuex, so this is probably related to our announcement about Vue 2's end of life announcement, right? The difference is that Vuex is a pretty well-defined library. So the main difference is that Vuex is pretty much done, in the sense that its API is stable, its implementation is stable. There really isn't too much that we need to do about it at this point. So people who've been using it, they'll be happy to just keep using it, like even if Vuex doesn't change, right? So in some way, Vuex doesn't really need a lot of maintenance, so which also makes it less important for us to say it's end of life. So we can pretty much say, okay, Vuex is going to be there, and we don't really have an end of life plan for it. The reason we plan for an end of life for Vue 2 is because the way the amount of issues that's coming in and the amount of ongoing work expectations that people have with Vue core is completely different from something like Vuex, which is its scope is really well defined, and we don't really see the need to keep adding stuff to Vuex. But people have different expectations for Vue 2, in the sense that if we add something to Vue 3, people will keep asking, can you add it to Vue 2 as well? And obviously, it's going to be very difficult if we have to keep doing that forever. So, which is why we need to set an end of life date.
Yeah, but it's not set yet, right?
It's not yet. Well, it's set. It's 18 months after the 2.7 release. So it's going to be end of 2023. Yes.
All right. Yeah, that's fair, of course. So people can start from now and migrating maybe to Pinia. They are willing to, support something for the long run. So
yeah. Vuex doesn't have an end of life date. So the end of life date was for Vue 2. Yeah.
But new features has an end of life. You said, right? So no new features in Vuex maybe, but it keep maintaining.
Well, yeah, it's technically maintained, but we just don't see there's a lot that needs to be done with Vuex at this point, because it's a really stable library.
All right. Yeah, that's great. Next question could be, that's a small one. What's your favorite package manager that you're using, or the recommended one? npm, yarn, or npm?
Currently, my personal favorite is PNPM. If you've been following the source code of the projects we're working on, both Vue 2, Vue 3, Vite are all using PNPM now. The main reason is that so it is heuristically, it feels like the fastest installer. It also has its author is super responsive. So basically, anything you report, any major issues that you find, the author is really active on Twitter. He'll respond and he'll fix it really fast. It's very actively maintained. Unlike NPM, which is kind of like you don't really know who to talk to if you find an issue with NPM. So PNPM so far also has, it saves disk space. It uses a really strict dependency installation algorithm. So it has the most deterministic package layout compared to NPM and Yarn. So as tooling authors, we prefer strictness in terms of package management because that reduces uncertainty when you install things, especially multiple versions of a package in your dependency tree. So PNPM strict, it's the strictest among the three. It's also the fastest, saves the most disk space, most actively maintained. Yeah, so it also has built-in workspace support, has built-in package support. So yeah, it's super powerful. And all around, it just yeah, it just does everything a little better than the other two.
Yeah, I think this is the main characteristics for any project in open source, that you need to have it maintained, and there is support if there is a problem. So yeah, you're totally right. So PNPM is your favorite then.
Yeah.
Right. So next question is about word about this Vue. Has it gained any traction? Is it a reliable tool to use in production?
So this is an interesting one because I made Petite Vue as more like scratching my own itch, because I feel like with Vue 3 more and more placing more emphasis on the compile time optimizations, we're kind of sort of I wouldn't say de-optimizing, but it becomes less and less favorable in a progressive enhancement scenario, right? So so I feel like Vue started its roots from being progressive enhancement friendly, while Vue 3 still is. I think in a lot of cases you can have a smaller and leaner option without a build step. That's the main reason I made it, but I didn't really push it too much because I didn't want to add another maintenance load to me. I feel like this is also one of those really well-defined scope. Like this is just how much it'll do. It won't really do too much. So I didn't really push it too much. So I don't think it's got huge traction at this point. Probably several thousand downloads a month. So that's really tiny compared to Vue proper. I think most people are like, okay, I'll just use Vue proper because I don't know if I'll run into something more complex. And I think a lot of people are using Alpine or Alpine.js, which is pretty much it serves a very similar role to Petite Vue. It's also inspired by Vue syntax, so which is also a really good option, because I don't want to say split my energy just maintaining Petite Vue and Vue proper at the same time, which is why I didn't really basically the claim. The claimer in Petite Vue is this is a one-time package. It is comes as is. If it's your use case, use it. If not, then don't use it, right? So, but Caleb has been maintaining Alpine really actively, so I think it's great that he's got his own community. And if people find that Alpine is a better suited for that, that's totally fine, right? I consider Alpine to be sort of in the Vue camp, in the Vue family, because it's so closely Spider related. So so in a way, I still think Petite Vue is pretty in a good state. Like if you have a lightweight use case and you just want to get the same Vue syntax, you definitely can use it in production. But as you see, it's designed for simple cases, right? So
yeah, of course there's other solutions for the same problem, but you know, always the community loves to have something personalized for Vue, right? So if something from Vue to Vue community, you love it more a little bit. That's why it might have a future.
In a way, if you have, I say this is mostly designed for people who are coming from, say, a traditional backend framework like Laravel or Rails, and you don't want heavy front end, then Petit Vue is totally fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's clear. That's clear. So, well, another question from a different corner. Is WebAssembly on Vue's radar?
The answer is obviously I've looked into it, but the conclusion is that I don't think WebAssembly is going to play an important role in Vue's roadmap. The main reason being that WebAssembly is good for computation intensive work like image encoding, decoding, or like video streaming, or so like or maybe AI, machine learning in the browser, stuff like that. But for a front end framework like Vue, a lot of the work happens. It's not strictly computation intensive. So a lot of work, the bottleneck comes with interaction with the DOM, have to handle all the events and stuff. So the complexity is not pure. It's not a pure computation problem. So the amount of gain, also in another sense, right? We are looking at other ways to adjust Vue's compilation strategies to rely less on computation. One of the reasons we come to think, front end is heavy computation is because virtual DOM, right? People think, okay, virtual DOM, you need to compute a lot of trees, you need to compare them. It's always going to take a lot of CPU time, so WebAssembly can help. Well, turns out there are other ways to do this. Essentially, we do more ahead of time optimizations, building smarter compilers, compile templates into more optimized runtime code. So to reduce the CPU overhead, but there will still be the DOM overhead there, right? A lot of time the performance will be inside in DOM interactions and also in third-party JavaScript, in image optimizations. So web performance is, if you think about your website performance as 100% pie, the portion that WebAssembly can directly improve is actually a pretty tiny slice. And the trade-off is when you use WebAssembly inside a framework, you greatly increase the deployment, maintenance, complexity of your framework itself and for your users as well. So when you do that, WebAssembly also isn't bundle size friendly. Typically, the binary files are pretty huge. So it doesn't really help with slow networks, right? It actually hurts your loading performance. So it's so in terms of like update performance, because the overhead of talking between WebAssembly and the JavaScript thread and the DOM, right? Because of that overhead, it actually doesn't help you that much. So most of the benchmarks I've seen so far, when you put DOM into the picture, the difference, it just kind of disappears. So so basically, in conclusion, WebAssembly turns out doesn't actually help that much for JavaScript frameworks. It will help you if you have certain tasks that you know it's just going to do a lot of CPU work directly in the browser. That's when you can use a, say, Rust-based library that compiles to WebAssembly. Like you want to compile something in your browser, definitely go with WebAssembly. That's going to be faster, probably. You also have to write good Rust code to actually make it faster than JavaScript, because JavaScript actually can also be really fast, right? So it's always situational. So it's not like a magic bullet saying, okay, turn your framework into WebAssembly, it's going to be magically faster. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. It depends always about the project type, right? So yeah, clear. It's not, at least for now, any plans for Vue to make like an integration with WebAssembly or doing something like that. So at the time being, we can just consider it now. So all right, the next one is a good question. It's would you suggest using the composition API instead of the options API when building a new application completely, or should we use options API mainly and composition when it's reusability?
So So this actually is a more generic question about when you ask about which should I use, the answer is always situational. So I will first suggest go to the latest docs. There is a page called Composition API FAQ. It talks about the benefits of Composition API. But on the other hand, the main difference between the two is Options API forces everyone to put their code in the respective buckets. So this sort of, let's call it the guardrails. Basically, you kind of, it guides you to where you go. So this can be helpful if your team has a lot of junior developers, beginners, not that experienced, or people who just don't have the habit to refactor and organize their code. Options API, well, basically, they don't have to think about it. When they write the code, they're naturally forced to organize their code in a certain way. This also makes the code that everyone writes somewhat consistent, but it's consistent at a surface level, right? So you get a basic guaranteed level of consistency. Let's say a 30% consistency across your team, no matter the expertise, no matter the experience. So in some way, right? If your whole team is inexperienced and beginners, and you use Composition API blindly, you may actually end up with messy code, because Composition API, on the other hand, is more freeform. It's just like writing plain JavaScript. So if you don't have good coding practices, you don't have good style guides, or you didn't train your team to understand how to organize your code properly, they will end up with a lot of mess. And right, you may actually, you may actually prefer Options API in this case, because it gives you a bottom line to guarantee consistency. However, if you train your team, or your team are a bunch of experienced developers, essentially, when you think writing Composition API, it is more similar to writing normal JavaScript code, because when you write normal JavaScript code, you have a file, you have functions, you have some procedural code, right? That's when you start thinking about, okay, how do I make this code more readable? How do I make it make sense? How do I abstract the modules? How do I think about reusability? Right? It's up to you, but you have to think about it when you're writing normal JavaScript. Composition API gives you the same ability to apply all that best practices when you're writing normal JavaScript to your component code. And that is also what you should do, right? If you don't think about this, so one of the reasons some users might moving from Options API to Composition API and find themselves at loss is because they were too used to not having to think about where the code go when they're using Options API, right? So not having to think about where the code go arguably has benefits, right? You can think less, and no matter who writes the code, it always look kind of the same. The downside is, because you don't think about it, the way the code is organized doesn't actually have inherent connection to what the code means. Okay, so but
so the
Composition API,
sorry for interrupting, but the Options API might be the good choice for a young team, or a team with not much experience, because otherwise the Composition API for inexperienced people might be a mess. Yeah,
and also it has to do with how complex your project is. If every one of your components is more or less doing the same thing, Options API probably will serve fine too. But Options API doesn't really allow you to convey the more higher level intentions about your component logic. You only see data, methods, watch, and that's it, right? But with Composition API, your code can actually convey intentions. You can convey intentions by abstracting your code into functions and naming those functions properly. So you can say, okay, this component does these things. It uses these external service to set up these refs. And then I'll pass these refs into this function, which does this, right? So when you're reading well-written Composition API code, you instantly understand what the code is trying to do. Instead of seeing a bunch of options, then trying to figure out, okay, what's the intention here, right?
Exactly.
So that's the difference between well-written code and not well-written code.
And you
So
cannot
composition
enforce that.
API. So the problem with composition API is if you don't think about it, you will write messy code. But if you think about it, you can write really, really readable code and maintainable code. So that's that. So basically, it has a lower threshold. You can have like 0 consistency, or you can have like 90% consistency if you're really, if your whole team is on board with the idea of write good code.
Yeah, with great power, it's a great responsibility, right?
Exactly.
That's great. So yeah, let's come with some quick questions about the adoption of Vue 3 and Vue maybe the future of Vue 4 as well. So how do you feel about the Vue 3 adoption in the community? Is it going well?
So
people are adopting.
Yeah, after the docs change, we're seeing pretty big increase. I think after the docs changes, we're seeing like 80%, close to double the adoption at this point. So among all the downloads, probably Vue 3 to Vue 2 is like 1 to 3 at this point.
Wow.
So obviously we still have Vue 2 is still the more downloads on npm, but that's because there are just so many existing old projects on Vue 2, and people probably just don't bother updating. But the amount of new projects, so think about the new projects started with Vue 3, it only possible to have been created in the past 2 years. So I think that's actually pretty good. The main, obviously, like this adoption, you kind of have to look at it comparatively, say, because Vue 2 to Vue 3 is not a completely non-breaking upgrade, right? So even for non-breaking upgrades, you will always see a pretty big lag, unless it's some like patch upgrades that people can just like upgrade without thinking about it. So I expect to see, I expect to see the number going even higher by the end of the year. But it's pretty promising since the switch. Yeah,
you're right. So regarding Vue 3 as well. So what should we expect from Vue 3 in the next 6 months? Do you have any significant updates?
Yeah, so expect 3.3 to come in the next few months, definitely. We're already working internally to sort of narrow down what should go into it. But currently, some of the obvious ones, we want to finalize reactivity transform, which is the syntax trigger for script setup. And actually, it's not limited to script setup. It's a generic syntax trigger for you to write Vue reactivity code in an easier way without having to deal with ref values. And then we also want to finalize suspense and improve the overall stability and usage for suspense and async setup. There's also going to be some significant SSR optimizations like lazy hydration, conditional hydration, essentially at async component boundaries. You can specify what hydration strategies it should use so that you don't have to like lock the CPU up for half a second when you hydrate a page. Then there will be some other explorations related to optimizing hydration performance. For example, we can mark a part of your component template as only dynamic on the server. So for the client, it serializes into a static piece of text and doesn't need to actually create vnodes or get hydrated at all. Then there are a lot of other small things in the list, but these are the ones I mentioned are the more major ones.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, and then beyond that, there's the thing I mentioned in the past keynote, the new compilation strategy, which tries to compile templates into a non-virtual DOM version of code. So that one is further down the road. We'll focus on 3.3 first, but that one is something we want to work on next after 3.3.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, given that these much plans for Vue 3, So when is the plan? Any plan for Vue 4 or any major updates breaking for Vue 4?
In short, there's really no plan for Vue 4. So we think Vue 2 to Vue 3 has been it's obviously a big update, right? And the breaking change has caused a lot of ecosystem churn, and people have been waiting on dependencies and all that. So we definitely don't want this kind of huge breaking upgrades again. So we don't really see a need to do that again, to be honest. So one of the reasons we made those breaking changes is because essentially we were saying, okay, if we are going to make breaking changes, let's make all of those at the same time so that we don't have to do them again. Right? So Vue 3 is essentially this new foundation that we see can keep evolving for a much longer time compared to Vue 2, because Vue 2, to be honest, in the beginning, there are just too many things looking back that weren't really well thought out. So Vue 3 is the reason we did a rewrite in Vue 3 is because the main focus is to rewrite it in a way so that we don't have to do breaking changes in the future again. So that's the hope. So for now, we don't have any plans for Vue 4 because we don't see any need to do breaking changes at this point. So regarding the new compilation strategy that we were talking about, one of the main goal we want to do is to introduce in a way that you can use it in your existing Vue 3 app without any sort of big bang rewrite or upgrade. You should be able to adopt it incrementally, or you can start a new project with it entirely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was too early to talk about Vue 4 since Vue 3 is just released. So hopefully more people are going to adopt it. And once people adopt it, I think no more breaking changes until 4, right? So it will always be backward compatible, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we hope that we can not do a 4 for as long as we can. That's the goal. So, yeah.
Some point it might be, Vue 3.100 something, right?
Even if we do a 4, I think it's more going to be along the lines of React or Angular majors, right? Think about the Angular majors; they do it twice a year, and it's always got some just like tiny changes, removing some deprecated APIs. So that's more like this one. Like consider V3, right? V2 to V3, most people can upgrade without changing anything. But internally, we do a lot of improvements. We remove deprecated APIs and all that. So even if Vue 4 comes, it will be more along these kind of majors instead of a Vue 2 to 3 kind of major.
All right, that's great.
Yeah.
So jump to the next question. I've heard that Vue 3 uses proxies. What does that mean?
Well, the proxy is the ECMAScript proxy, or ES6 proxy, as some people call it, or ES 2015 proxy. Yeah. If you don't really know what a proxy is, you probably just Google it on MDN. It's a built-in language feature.
And I think the question is more like, what does it mean that Vue is using proxies for what?
Oh, okay. We use it for the reactivity system. So when you call the reactive API, you pass in an original object, and what you get back is a proxy of that original object. And this proxy is reactive. It tracks read access to its properties. It also tracks write operations to the properties. So when you read from a proxy, reactive proxy, inside an effect, let's say the render function, during render, when you read from a reactive object, its properties are tracked. So later on, when you change that property, because you're doing that through the proxy as well, it triggers the set trap, and which notifies Vue to say, okay, this component's dependency changed. Now we need to re-render.
Right. Yeah, that's great explanation. Thanks for that. So our next question is, what do you think is the most common way to use Vue for progressive enhancements or for full single-page apps?
To be honest, I don't know which one is more common. I think both are equally very, very common. the reason I say that is because we have over 12 million downloads on npm per month, right? So obviously most of these are probably, when you're downloading from npm, you're probably use a build tool, which means you're probably doing some sort of SPAs. And then I checked the JS deliver CDNs. Vue actually gets 1 billion hits a month on JS deliver, which means a lot of people are using Vue from a CDN, so they're probably using that for progressive enhancement, right? So, like, I can't really say which one is bigger, but I think there are equally huge amount of people using Vue for both.
All right, that's great. Yeah. So jumping to the next question is, can I create web components with Vue, and why would I want to or would not to?
You can. Vue 3 has a built-in API called define custom element, which allows you to basically pass the exact same component options into it, and then the result is actually a native HTML element class. Both CLI and the Vue plugin supports building single file Vue components, the Vue files, into custom elements as well. The reason you would want to do that is, say you're working in a big organization and you worked on some custom components, and then you find, okay, this is great, we can reuse them. However, your team next door, they don't use Vue. They're using React or they're using vanilla JavaScript. And they're like, we don't know how to use Vue. We don't want to introduce Vue into our stack. That's when you can say, okay, we'll give you web components. It'll work in any whatever stack you're using. It'll work. You just use them as native HTML elements, and you're done. Right. So that's the main use case.
That's a great explanation. I think, yeah, it answered well. So next up is, yeah, we have a lot of questions. To be honest, I'm trying to just pick some of them because the time is flying. So this is a good one. What do you think of Bun, and will it replace Node or not?
Yeah. So for people who don't know, we should probably explain a little bit what Bun is. So Bun is a new JavaScript runtime. It's very new, so it's a little bit early to say how far it will go, because Bun has a pretty crazy, ambitious roadmap. So it's not only a runtime; it's not also. So it's a JavaScript runtime similar to Node, but it's not built on V8. It's built on JavaScript core. So V8 is a JavaScript engine that's maintained by Google, and it's behind Chrome and Chromium and Edge. But JavaScript core is this JavaScript engine maintained by Apple, which is behind Safari. And Bun's own code is written with Zig, which is a pretty new low-level language, which requires manual management. So essentially, Bun is created with extreme performance in mind. So a lot of the things, its author is Jared Sumner. He basically hand-tuned a lot of these lower-level things to make sure everything is as fast as possible. So when you start a simple HTTP server in Bun versus with say Node, and both are written with JavaScript, but the lower level like networking stack one is using, I think a lot of the stuff in Node is written with C++. Like in Deno is written with Rust, and in Bun is written with Zig. So Bun is fast in this sense. So all the native part of a JavaScript runtime in Bun is extremely fast. Now, it also tries to do a lot of other things as well, like package management. You can use Bun to install NPM packages. You can use Bun to do transpilation. It actually ships a TypeScript and JSX transpiler, which kind of overlaps with ES build. So initially, I think Bun was trying to do everything from the runtime to the transpiler to the bundler to the dev server with hot module replacement and everything. And I think he noticed that the scope is a little bit too big. So currently the focus is kind of scaled back to the runtime side. So which means you can think of it as, I don't know, I think it has, if Jared can focus a bit more to narrow down what Bun really wants to become, say a performance-oriented runtime to compete with Node, I think it will have its niche market. Node is huge, so for a lot of big companies, they will have risk thinking about Bun. There's a lot of uncertainty with Bun, mostly because currently it's still maintained by one person, and the scope is really, really huge. So it's a question, unless he can build a team or a company around it, I think a lot of companies will have concerns of actually adopting it in production usage.
It's too early
and the other issue is because it's written with Zig, which is a relatively new and unproven language compared to something, say, like Rust or C++, right? Like Bun is still really early. There are a lot of bugs there because it's manual memory management. There will be like seg faults when you run into a bug, which is kind of scary if you use in production. So I think it really depends on a lot of factors at this point. So first, what does Bun want to focus on? And the second is how long can Jared keep doing this alone, or when will he be able to scale it to a team? And the third is whether he can actually address all the memory like related issues, errors in Bun to make it stable. And in order to make it stable, I think he needs a team. So that's my opinion, right? So so I would say the biggest challenge for Bun at this point is actually operational, because I don't think you can Jared will be able to do this as a one-man team forever. Like I know, like I saying this coming from me, because a lot of people think I'm doing this, like I've been doing Vue like as a one-man team, but the reality is Vue has scaled into a team, and I've scaled Vite into a team, so that I can focus on a small piece of the ecosystem, like the Vue core or higher level decisions for Vite, right? Because I know I can't really scale this thing beyond a certain point if it's only me. So I think the biggest challenge for Bun is how can Jared scale this above just himself, and that's the biggest factor at this point, I think.
That's a good question. That's a good question to him. I think it's this is the case always for any newly open source library. That it's a one-man show for a while, and then you feel that okay, there's too much to handle, a lot of bugs. So I think Bun might have a good future as well, but not in the meantime. It needs to be.
It definitely needs some time to grow. Yeah, it definitely needs some time. Yeah.
Yeah. So since we're talking about open source contribution, I'm going to just pick one for that as well. You are obviously accomplished a ton of contributed to open source. Do you have any tips for anyone who would like to contribute to open source?
So I think for me, open source now is more like a lifestyle. But if you are just trying to get into open source while you have your normal day job, my suggestion is try to find things that you're genuinely interested in, like a project or a direction or an idea that you're generally excited about, so that you don't feel like it's a burden when you're working on that idea. Because when you have something relatively successful in open source, there will be a lot of pressure. Because you'll start having people filing issues all over the place. You'll find all the bugs that you didn't realize that you created in your code. There will be a lot of like negative things that you'll have to deal with once you make it successful enough, right? So I think to avoid burnout, which is probably the most common thing that I see, like when people suddenly have something more popular than they thought, and they realize, okay, like this actually has become a burden for me to have to keep maintaining it, right? So I think the main thing is you need to set a proper expectation of what you want to get out of open source. right? You can do it as a hobby. You can do it as a way for you to, say, build your personal brand or build up your resume, or these are all completely valid and legit reasons to do open source. The main thing is you need to do it and be honest with your goals. So right, so I think don't do it because it seems fashionable, or you think, okay, this is gonna make me famous or make me feel good. Doing open source for just to feel good usually doesn't end well. You need to be kind of realistic and set some realistic expectations. Or that's about creating your own project, right? So if you're trying to contribute to other people's projects, I think the main thing is try to put yourself in the maintainer's shoes and think, what would I do if I were the maintainer? Would this PR make sense? Am I raising this question in a way that's easy for the maintainer to understand what I'm trying to do here, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially, it's important to basically follow what they're doing, see like how they've been handling past issues, how they've been handling their past PRs, what kind of decisions they made in the past. Then you try to figure out, okay, now with this issue, this is probably what they would like to do. And then you send a PR addressing that problem. That makes it very, very likely for them to accept it, right? So it's important for you to, essentially, when you're contributing to someone else's project, you're knocking on the door trying to enter their house and say, can I work with you? So you're a guest initially, right? So you need to follow the rules of the house owner. If you follow the rules properly, the house owner will be like, wow, like you actually like observed all my rules and you're following them perfectly. So yeah, welcome. You're now part of the team. Right? So that's naturally what happens. So in a lot of ways, it's about being able to being willing to learn what the maintainer is trying to do, and then you try to replicate that for them. That's the easiest way for you to get their approval.
That's a great advice. With this, I would love to wrap it up from here. Thank you very much on behalf of all the community. Ivan, for being here, for answering all these questions. Of course, we have tons of other questions, but you know, the time flies, and we don't like to, you know, keep you late more. I think it's 10 p.m. now in Singapore. So thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure having this talk.
Thanks, everyone. Great questions. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.